Okay, so I'm Lisa Cooperman. I'm being really silly today. I'm super punchy because it's, this time of the semester, it's Friday. Like, wow, week's been really long. I'm going to talk about the AMCAS application process, and then we'll talk about our process in the office, and then Lucy and Dominic, our pre-med interns, will talk about their experience applying to medical school. I'm going to focus on AMCAS, ACOMAS, which is the osteopathic medical school application service, is not really that much different. I mean, it's the same primary, secondary interview process. The app itself is a little bit different, but generally things are pretty much the same, and where they're not, I'll let you know. So I'll talk about how AMCAS works, some of the dates, the application sections, what happens after you submit the AMCAS application, the verification process, what can be changed after you submit, criminal background checks, multiple accept data, the fee assistance program, and then the additional resources that the AAMC makes available. So basically, AMCAS is open, so is ACOMAS. You can begin filling out the application now. In terms of the DO applications, you can actually start submitting them at any time. You cannot submit your AMCAS application, I think it's June 5th or June 7th, the date will be on one of the slides. So when you're not studying for finals and you want to just bang out your biographical information and some of the things that are easy to do in the AMCAS application, I'd encourage you to do that and just navigate around it a little bit and see what you're going to be filling out in there. So if you think that you might be eligible for the fee assistance program, you should look into that before you take the MCATs, before you register for the MCATs, before you submit your AMCAS application. So if you're on financial aid here, there's a good chance you might be eligible for the fee assistance program, which I'll talk about later on, but it's helpful in terms of helping to fund the process, which is expensive. The application goes to AMCAS, they do a verification process, and then they make the application available to the medical schools. This is what the home screen looks like, where you can sign in and begin working on the application. So, like I said, it's open June 7th. You can begin submitting. Medical schools will not start to receive applications until June 24th. So no medical school in the country is going to get an application from AMCAS before June 24th. They may begin processing the applications, but the first initial transmission will happen at the end of June. The early decision deadline is August 1st, and then the deadlines for the applications are September through December, but we know that applying early is better. You want to get your application submitted in June or early July. That's what you're shooting for, because medical schools work on rolling admissions. So we definitely do not want to wait until the deadlines to apply. I think that's mud, right? They're working. For those people out in internet land, the building's shaking. So most of the schools in the country participate in AMCAS. There's a couple that don't. Texas Medical School, Dental School Application System has their own system. So if you're applying to Texas schools, you just need to let us know what your idea is for that. And 142 schools are using the AMCAS letter submission. So where letters are submitted to AMCAS and then made available to the medical schools. ACOMAS also has a letter submission process through that mechanism, and that's what we use to upload the composite letter of recommendation. 112 schools are now doing criminal background checks, so that's later on in the process. It's $160 for one school and then $37 for each additional school. So you want to think about the number of schools that you're applying to. On average, people apply about 13, 15 schools. Once you start getting up in the 20s and 30s, it's, maybe at the primary stage, it doesn't seem like a big deal. You're just ticking a box. But when you get to secondaries, they take time, and it's unrealistic to apply to so many schools that you won't have time to invest in the secondaries, which are going to need to be turned around quickly, and you're going to be paying for the primary. So, you want to think about your school choice and what makes sense. It doesn't make sense to apply to schools that you don't have any intention on going to, if it's in a geographic region that you're not interested in, or for other reasons. Just because it's a tick box and $37, I wouldn't add extra schools. So the application section includes these areas, and I'm going to go through each of them now. You only have one AAMC account, so you only want to create one if you don't have one. So if you haven't, if you've taken the MCAT, you already have a AAMC letter. If you did an SMDEP program, you may have a AAMC ID. So you don't want to create multiple IDs, because then it can get confusing on the application end for the schools if you have two things open. And you want to use your legal name, what's going to match your transcript. So you don't want anything to interfere with the matching of your materials to AMCAS and ACOMAS for the medical schools. So this just talks about, this is what the screen looks like. How many of you have created an account? Most of you are in there. Yeah, I know. Anxious, right? You're like, May 3rd, get into AMCAS. I gotta hurry up and create my account. This is what the main menu looks like, and you can check on each of the sections. You see, it'll tell you if a section is completed. An important part to notice here is the status. So over on the left-hand side here, it says status, and it says that the application hasn't been submitted. That's where you're going to be able to tell what's happening with your application, if it's being processed, if it's in verification period. When it's processed and sent to the medical schools, it'll say processed, which is important for our internal process. So this is the identification section. Like I said, you want to make sure that everything in here is accurate. So because your ID and your name is going to be matched up to other pieces of the application that aren't coming from you. So here's where you're going to enter the schools that you attended, and you're going to enter every school that you've attended post high school, and you will have to send transcripts from every school that you've attended. Even if the grades are listed on your Vassar transcript, you're going to have transcripts for each of the schools. So if you had courses transferred here, and for some study abroad programs, and study abroad is a unique kind of situation. It just depends. If you did a Vassar program, like the Wesleyan Paris program, that's a Vassar program. Your grades are on the Vassar transcript, so you wouldn't need an additional transcript. If you did a program through another college, so let's say you went through Brown, then you would need a transcript from Brown as well as the Vassar transcript. Down at the bottom here, you'll see an advisor release section, and I would appreciate it if you click yes here, because what that means is that, not that I'm going to have access to your actual application, but I'll be able to see when it's being processed, which is important for a composite letter Q, and it releases the statistics to Vassar, so that when I do the statistics every year, it's inclusive of everybody who's applied. So if you don't check yes, I'm going to email you and ask you to go back in and check yes. So please check yes. We're here to help you, and I don't have enough time anyway to go into everybody's individual things, but I can see the schools that you've applied to, MCAT scores, things like this. So here's where you're going to enter all of the colleges that you've attended. AMCAS has a transcript request form, and you see down here you can prepare it at the time that you're entering the school, or on the home page there's an opportunity to get a transcript request form. Before you leave this semester, you can request your transcript and indicate that you want it to be held for spring grades. So you might as well do that before you leave campus, so that you don't have to worry about it. Transcripts are requested through the registrar's office. I don't request transcripts on your behalf. I don't request transcripts from other schools. You're going to have to request the official transcript be sent to AMCAS or ACOMAS. They will not accept transcripts from applicants. It has to come from the institution that you attended. And it's good for you to include that transcript request form, because it has your AMCAS ID, and when it gets to AMCAS or ACOMAS, it's a match. They don't have to try and figure out whose transcript it is and where it goes. There are lots of tutorials that you can watch on AAMC's website about how to enter. This is for entering your study abroad. I'm not going to bog you down with details about study abroad right now and how to enter that. I am going to send you more frequently emails through May and June and July and August, telling you where you should be at in the application process and the things that you need to know as you kind of hit each phase. So I'm happy to answer questions. There is an instruction manual from AMCAS. I get the answers to your questions from the instruction manual. So it would be helpful if you check there first. And if you really can't figure it out, and sometimes it's hard for me to figure out, so I understand, but some things are pretty straightforward. So be sure to look in the instruction manual. The emails that I send out are all archived in Moodle. And I try to answer, these frequent questions that come up, like about our unit system and how to enter AP credit and things like that. So I'll be here to support you over the course of the application cycle. So this is the biographic information section, the summary of what you've just entered on the screens prior, so those fields. And you have an opportunity to enter your ethnicity and your race, your citizenship, all of these things. And these things are taken into account when medical schools are looking at the applications in terms of diversifying the applicant, during the admission cycle, getting a full holistic picture of who you are and where you come from and, what that distance traveled has been. So this year, this is a new section in AMCAS, which has to do with DACA, which is for undocumented students, deferred action for childhood arrivals, which is just a legislation through the U.S. government. There is an opportunity now to list your DACA status in the application. You're going to enter your coursework into AMCAS. I recommend that you request an official transcript for yourself as well. It's probably better for you to use the official transcript instead of the X-Banner transcript to enter information into AMCAS, because it's going to be exactly what AMCAS gets. And the verification process involves them looking at your transcripts and what you enter to make sure that it matches. So while you're requesting that transcript to be sent to the respective application services, request one for yourself. They're free. And then you can have it with you when you're entering in your coursework. So you're going to enter in the academic year and term. All these things are required, whether or not the course was lecture or lab. For our courses, the only thing that's going to be different, you're going to enter everything exactly as it appears on your transcript. The only thing that you're going to add is whether or not your course had a lab. So you see here it says Biology 1 and lab. And lab is not going to be on your transcript. And we don't award separate credits for labs. So for your courses that have a lab, you're just going to add and lab. Otherwise, you're going to enter everything exactly as it appears on your transcript. You do not convert the units for AMCAS. We're going to leave it in the units that you have on your transcript. For ACOMAS, just to complicate things, you do convert the units. One master unit equals 3.5 free credit hours. I'm going to send information over our listserv newsfeed with that, and it's on Moodle. But just know for AMCAS, you are not going to convert the units, and for ACOMAS, you do. I'm not sure. I have to double check. I'm going to say I have to double check because I'd be guessing. We have few Texas students applying, maybe one or two a year. So we'll look and we'll make sure. But you can see down in the special course types that you can indicate, what type of course it was. Sometimes it's like confusing. What do I list field work as? What do I list this independent study as? And I would say to use your best judgment. Some of this is just judgment based, and I don't think that that's the kind of thing that's going to hold up your application, and it's not going to be spelled out in the instructions verbatim for field work and things like this. So the work activities section, you have up to 15 entries, and you can identify 3 as your most significant, and each one you'll have space to describe what that experience was. For the 3 most significant, you have extra space. This is more in a paragraph format, so not bulleted like a resume would be. And what I would say is you want to talk about what your contribution was, maybe what you learned from the experience. If it's a research experience, I would say to talk about your role and what you learned and contributed rather than the specificities of the particular research. So it's not like a research abstract. It's more like your experience. They're trying to get to know you better. Oh, and on that page, you'll see it says contacts name. So that's another one for like field work. You probably list the fieldwork office, but for student orgs, because you know student orgs are all student run, you don't have a supervisor, you can list student activities, you can list my name, just somebody who, it's unlikely that they're going to contact people, but if they do, it's just somebody who can verify that you really did do that experience. So letters of evaluation, and this is important. What we are providing for you is a committee letter. So you see there are three options here: committee letter, letter packet, individual letter. We're providing a committee letter, and you're going to put your advisor's name as the author. You could put the advisor's address, or you could put my address. It doesn't really matter. The letter's coming from my office. So what happens is your faculty advisor takes the letters that are in your file and compiles them into a composite letter of recommendation, quoting liberally from the individual letters or attaching them in their entirety. The letter then goes to the committee. The committee members weigh in on, you know, the recommendation level and the content of the letter. They may make suggestions. Then it goes back to the advisor who finalizes it. Then it comes to me, and I read through it and make sure everything is good to go. And then Jean uploads it to AMCAS or COMIS. Sometimes we attach letters in their entirety, and you can trust that your advisor has your best interests at heart. We want to support you as strongly as possible. Often if somebody's been out for a few years and they worked with a physician or they've been working on research, that letter will likely be attached in its entirety. If you're applying to DO programs and you have a DO letter, that letter is going to be attached in its entirety. If you're applying to MD PhD programs, we're going to send a composite letter. If you're applying to both MD and MD PhD, we're going to have two composite letters, one for the MD PhD program, one for the MD program, and then we're going to send a letter packet with all the letters of recommendation, because that's what the PhD programs want. And if that's your situation, you know, I can tell you, because I know it's a little confusing, because you're going to have 3 letter request forms. But for most of you, you're going to have one committee letter. And for AMCAS, you're going to fill out, I never know what the next slide's going to give me, but you're going to fill out the form, you're going to scan it or send it as a PDF or fax it, or you can mail it. Saving it as a PDF and sending it to Jean is probably the easiest way, but that's what's going to have your letter ID on it. And that letter ID has to show up on your AMCAS, with your AMCAS number on your composite letter. A COMIS is a little bit different. You are going to list that you're getting a committee letter. There's going to be a request form, and it's going to come to our office. So you can list fellowships@vassar.edu as the email address or my email address. Jean is going to upload the letter to a COMIS. You can add letters later on in the application cycle. So let's say you're doing something this summer and you want to include that letter in September. That's fine. We can use the same letter ID and upload it. It'll be appended to your composite letter, and the medical schools will be made aware that there's a new letter. Let's say you have a letter because you're tight with somebody on the admissions committee at a particular school and you want that letter sent to that school. We can do that as a separate letter. You would create a new letter request form and we would send it along. But that's, and you would just have it sent to that one school. But that's really the only time that we have this separate letter sent, unless a medical school requests it. So there are some schools in the country that want individual letters of recommendation. There's few, but there are some, just to make life difficult. So when we talk about the medical school application process, you're going to have lots of questions, and a lot of the times, and you know this from the 4 years that you've been here, the answer is it depends. It depends on the medical school, whether or not they'll accept AP English, whether or not they'll accept other reading writing courses, whether or not they want an additional letter. But all the letters are going to go electronically. For those that don't use the ACOMIS electronic system, or for OptumCAS, We use virtual evals, which is just the old school way of sending the letters of recommendation, but very few schools use that anymore. What's nice is now it's going through the centralized application services. So you're going to indicate, and I can talk more about the committee letter process at the end, but just I know it's a lot of information, and I'm going to keep reminding you throughout the cycle, so you don't have to digest all of it today. But you're going to indicate in the applications service which schools you want to receive your application. You're also going to assign the letters to the schools. That's your responsibility. When we're just going to upload the letter to AMCAS or a COMIS, you have to indicate which schools you want that letter sent to. And if you leave it dormant and the letter's there, the schools aren't going to get your composite. And I say it because people do it sometimes. They let their composite letter sit in the system for a month and not realize that they were supposed to release it to the medical school. So there are some things that are our responsibility. There are some things that are your responsibility. We're working together. And there are some things that I can't do it for you. I can't go in and release your letter. That's the applicant has to do that. Same thing like I can't request your transcripts. So you just want to make sure that you know what your responsibilities are. So you're going to indicate where you want the letter sent. We're going to upload the letter. There's a personal statement as part of the application. It asks you, why do you want to be a doctor? 5,300 characters. If you're applying to MD, PhD programs, there are 3 statements. 1, why do you want to be a doctor? 1, why do you want the MD, PhD? And a 3rd, about your research experience. I want to step back to say that the composite letter goes with the secondary applications. The composite letter does not hold up your primary application. You submit your primary before the composite is uploaded. In fact, you have to submit your primary application in order to get a composite, in order for that process to start. So, you know, don't worry. You're going to submit a primary application. The MCATs complete your primary. Then you're going to get secondary applications. There's usually around a 2-week turnaround time that they expect them back. And meet up with the secondary and complete your application at the respective medical schools. So most of you have or are studying for the MCATs. The last date that we recommend that you take an MCAT is June. Medical schools work on rolling admissions. It takes 30 days to get the MCAT score. If you push your MCATs out to July or August, you're going to be behind in the application cycle. People are going to be getting interviews, and you're just going to be submitting your primary application. There are fewer seats, become more competitive. The other thing about applying early and hopefully getting your acceptances early has to do with scholarship. Some schools have scholarship funds that they award to incoming students. They award those as they make offers. So by the time December comes around, they have no money left. So it's not only that you're putting yourself at a disadvantage by applying late, you may not get funding if you were eligible for it earlier on in the cycle. So it's important to apply early. Early is better. But error-free is also important. So don't rush to get the application in. You do not have to get your application in the first week of June. You know, everybody says, I'm going to submit June 7th, first day. Okay, but you don't have to. It's okay. Anytime in June, I promise. It's okay. Early July, you want to get it in. But you want to make sure that you spend time on your personal statement and that you enter everything in there correctly, because you cannot go back and change things after you submit that application. So early is good, but error-free is better. You can indicate in the application if you're taking a future MCAT, right? So if you took the MCATs and you're taking them over, or if you're going to take a late June MCAT, you might want to submit your primary application before you see your scores. So when you submit the primary application, you can list just one school and it'll begin the processing. It takes 4 to 6 weeks for the application to process, and I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. It only processes once. So if you submit the application not knowing your MCAT scores, you know you're absolutely going to apply to all your state schools, put them in there, let the app start processing. When you get your MCAT scores, you can add schools, and it'll be immediately available to the medical school. It's not going to go through another processing phase. So that's a way to sort of keep things moving along until you get your MCAT score. This is what the results look like for the new MCATs with each of the sections and the confidence bands and the score profile. What I'm hearing is that 508, 509 is like the old 30 on the MCAT, so what you're shooting for, and you want to have an equal distribution among the 4 sections. So, you know, getting a 509, but getting in the 15th percentile in one section is not going to be favorable. You want to try and, you know, have an even distribution across the section. So as you're preparing for your MCATs, a good way to judge how you're going to do on them is your practice tests. Not want to take the MCATs for practice. How schools handle multiple test scores depends on the school. They may average them. They may take the most recent. They may look at a composite. Take the practice tests for practice. You know, you don't have anything to lose by doing that. And if you're not performing well on the practice tests, I mean, the likelihood of you going into the actual test and performing significantly better is not likely. So keep on studying until you feel that you're ready to apply for the MCAT. And if it means you have to push the application back, it's okay. I know people, everybody who's listening to this or here today wants to go to medical school, you know, next year. It doesn't hurt you to have time between medical school and Vassar. It's better for you to apply when you have a strong application and you feel like your application is the strongest. You see, medical school applications are expensive and it takes time. And, you know, Dominic and Lucy will tell you about, you know, really what the time commitment is when you're putting together the application and, you know, some of the costs involved in it. And I believe that first impressions count. So when you submit an application and you don't get in, the medical schools will look next year to see what you did to improve the application over the course of the year. So I'm not saying this to discourage anybody. I want you to apply when you feel like your application is the strongest, and we're here to support you whenever you decide to apply. But, you know, it's also being realistic and knowing, you know, did I have enough time to study? Do I think I could do better? You know, is my application as solid as I want it to be now? So the score breakdowns and the confidence bands will appear in the AMCAS application. So this, you know, we're all wrapping our head around the new MCAT. Advisors, applicants, and medical school admissions deans and directors. So the percentiles, I think, are going to be a critical factor in how they're comparing people to each other. And the percentiles are updated with each administration of the MCAT. So you can see here, these are the percentiles for these last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 administrations. Or are these the scores that you've released? 5 times is too many times to take the MCAT. But anyway, you'll see there are percentiles, and this looks like these are the scores that have been released. So the front end of this presentation was created by Double AMC. That's why I'm like, what? Some of these slides are new slides because of the new MCATs. Scores will be listed in reverse chronological orders, and the old MCAT scores will now include percentiles, so that they have a way, they're really apples and oranges, but so they have a way of comparing the new scores to the old scores. So you'll have to, this is important, and you probably are receiving emails from DB Brown over the yesterday, today, maybe tomorrow, about the certification. So important part of the application is institutional actions, and it's important that you're honest. If we're asked to verify any institutional actions, we have to release the information that we have. We hold the information for 7 years. Warnings will be released. So, you know, if you had an electrical extension cord listed on your application, is not going to keep you from going to medical school. Minor infractions are not going to hurt your application. You know, you're not the first person to have been at an underage party, or, you know, to have been caught with alcohol as a freshman, or even, you know, later on. Hopefully you learn over the 4 years that you've been here. But it's not going to keep you out of medical school. So it's better for you to disclose information up front than for it to come out later, because that's when it can hurt you. If, you know, being at an underage party comes out when they ask us and you didn't release it, that can hurt you, because then they're going to say, why didn't you tell us? Why are you trying to hide this information? So if you're not sure about any warnings or institutional actions or any kind of conduct things that might be on your record, just check with DB. He'll tell you, he'll talk about it. I'm with you. I'm happy to talk to you about it. But, you know, like I said, most minor infractions, and even sometimes, you know, multiple boo-boos, if you learn from it and you've grown and matured, you can demonstrate that in the application, you know, it's probably going to be okay, you know. But it's important that you're honest. And so here's a certification statement where you talk about, you know, that you actually completed this application, and you understand that they're going to do a criminal, they may do a criminal background check on you. If you're not sure about that, you know, that's something you have to kind of find out on your own about criminal background checks. But so just be honest and disclose. It's better that way. So after submission, the only things that you can change after you submit your application is your address and your contact information. You cannot go back in and change typos or add activities or work on your statement. So that's why I say you want to make sure everything is in good shape when you submit it. So the verification process is all of your transcripts have to be received by AMCAS, and then you complete your application and submit it. And then it enters this verification queue. It can take up to 6 weeks for the application to process. Here you can see over the last 2 years the peak processing times, sort of like a normal curve. Most people are submitting their applications June, July, and the processing time starts to peak around August and come down around September, October, November, December. Your app's going to be processed quicker at the end of the fall semester, but that's because everybody has submitted applications earlier. So you want to get it in June or early July, and sometimes it'll process in a day, but in this peak processing times, it's going to take a little bit longer. So like I said, the only things you're going to be able to change after you submit, I guess you can change your date of birth after you submit. I guess if that's like a big boo-boo, they want you to fix that. You can add letters of recommendation after you submit. Like I said, you can add MCAT testing days. So let's say for some reason it doesn't turn out the way you had anticipated, you can go back in and say, I'm going to take it again, so the medical schools know. And you can go back in and answer yes to that question that I want to release to my advisor. So we saw lots of the schools are now doing criminal background checks. You know, they're doing this because there are background checks when you get licensed to be a physician. And it would be really terrible if somebody goes through 4 years of medical school and does a residence, or 4 years after you do that, you become licensed and you can't get a license because there's something on your record and you didn't know about it, or you tried to hide it. So, you know, just know there's no additional charge to you for this, but lots of schools are doing this upon acceptance, so not prior to acceptance. Medical schools cannot see who other schools that you've applied to. In February, medical schools can see if you've been accepted at multiple schools, but they can't see all the schools that you've applied to. In April, you can only hold one acceptance. So if you can hold multiple acceptances up until that time, but in mid-April, you have to decide and hang on to one. That doesn't mean you have to go there. If you get off a wait list somewhere else, or you get another acceptance, you can change and have the new one. But then the medical schools can see where you're holding acceptances. This national acceptance report goes out. I talked earlier about the fee assistance program. They're not retroactive, so that's why I said to apply for it before the MCATs, before the application. I'm not sure, do we talk about, this is the eligibility for fee assistance. I feel like the slides are coming to an end here. When you are awarded the fee assistance, that you have the benefits for an entire year. So that's good. Two calendar years. You can find information about this on AAMC. We're at the end of this PowerPoint. But there are instruction manuals and guides, lots of tutorials. They have Twitter channel, YouTube. So you can keep on top of your application. On Twitter, they indicate like where they're at in the verification process. So if you submit an application on June 26th, they'll say June 26th applications are now being verified, or you know what I mean? You know, if you want to be obsessive. I actually don't think that's obsessive. I think that's perfectly acceptable to stay on top of your application. A couple of things that weren't covered in this PowerPoint that I want to talk to you about is the course classification and the difference between the science GPA for AAMC and AACOMAS. So when you enter in your courses, you are gonna classify where you think they fall. So you're gonna come up with a science GPA, biology, chemistry, physics, and math. For DO schools, they do not include math in the science GPA. But you're going to classify every single course that you put in there, and there's a course classification guide to help you. So people often ask, well, neuroscience, is that a science or is that a social science, like or psychology courses? If a course has 50% or more of the content, so let's say a neuroscience course that has 50% or more biology, you classify it as biology. Statistics, that's a math class. Doesn't matter what department you took it in. So if a course has 50% or more science, what they consider the sciences, then you classify it as a science. If you classify something as a science that's not a science, and it's obvious, right? That's going to hold up the processing of your application. That's when they do the verification process. They're going to eyeball your app and your transcript. And if there's like social psychology, that's not going to fall under the natural sciences. They're going to flag it, and then it's going to delay the processing of your application. So don't try to sneak courses in there into the BCPM if they don't belong there, and don't try to keep courses out if they do belong there. So, you know, use your judgment. Other courses, where you classify them, you know, I don't know that it makes a huge difference if you put a multidisciplinary course as a sociology course or an anthropology course. I think where it makes the biggest difference is it a science or not? You know, so field work, what am I going to classify it as? You know, you decide. It's not, they're not going to come up with a special GPA for any of the other disciplines. Same thing. If there's 50% or more of one of those sciences, biology, chemistry, physics, or math, then you classify it under the respective category. That makes sense? Okay. So this is just social media. Everybody's on it. So I just want to talk a little bit about Moodle, which I work very hard on. I say it every year. I hope you're in Moodle. I hope you're looking at Moodle, because the website, only so much information go on the website. The emails, there's only so much information that I want to put in an email, because I don't want you to get lost in an email or open it and say, I don't want to read this, because it's all important. So I you know, it used to be, I used to have these long emails, and I hated them because I was like, why? I have open houses and emails, you know, or all of these other things. And so I've had Moodle going for probably 5 or 6 years now, and you know, it's grown and developed over time, and you know, I add to it and I update it frequently. So I hope that you are in there. These are all the different sections that are now in Moodle. So there's information about the new MMIs, the multiple mini interviews. I've been collecting New York Times articles, journal articles, websites that cover hot topics and ethics, which are things that can come up in the interviews. Some of our pre-med interns have put secondary questions in there, but this is where I'll put clinical or research opportunities, in addition to VC Link, which is our searchable database, you know, that I collaborate with the CDO with. But there are resources in there, and I hope that you'll use them. This is what the front-facing page of Moodle looks like. And so you see here, I just put up recently that there's this Premed Emergency and Wilderness Medicine Program, and they have a scholarship. This is, I cut and paste half the screens. But what's important here is where it says News Forum. That's where all the emails that I have sent you live, in the News Forum. So if you ever want to go back, say, oh, I know she said that in an email, you can go back to the News Forum and look at it. I try to make the subjects intuitive so that you can pick the right one. The other important part of Moodle is the gradebook function. This is where you can track your letters of recommendation. So go into the gradebook function. You see this is someone's thing. I deleted all but one recommender because we know Teresa's writing for lots of people. So this person, actually it must have been 2015 grad. She requested a letter from Teresa Garrett, and under the grade you see yes, we have the letter. If there were another name under Teresa, that says that we've requested the letter, but see, it says no, we don't have it. If you don't see the name of a person that you think you requested a letter from, that means we haven't requested the letter. So just be in touch with us and say, you know, I requested a letter from Joe Tansky, but I don't see it in Moodle. I just want to make sure that the request went out. So this is where you can periodically check in to see, are your letters in? The deadline for letters is June 1st. Vassar faculty will likely submit the letters around June 1st or after because everybody's dealing with finals right now and commencement. So don't panic. Don't panic if the letters aren't here by June 1st. We're going to do everything we can to get your letters on file. But, you know, once it starts getting late, you might want to reach out to your recommenders, especially people off campus, to remind them to submit their letters. And we send out reminders as well. So if you want us to send a reminder, you can just email Jean and she'll do that. So I think the whole reason why we started Moodle was so that we could allow you to track your letters of recommendation. So this is another important thing for you to know. And I've told you all of this when you opened up the file, but it's important for you to know. I talked to you a little bit about how the composite letter writing process works, and it's a time-consuming process. Each advisor has a pool of advisees that they're writing a composite letter for. So how do they prioritize the writing of the letters? Basically, when your primary application is processed, and we have that portal that we log into every single day and we can see where the status of your application is. When it says processed and your file is complete, the letters have to be here in order for your advisor to write the letter. You enter the composite letter queue. You can expect your composite 3 to 4 weeks after that time. We will indicate in Moodle the date that you enter the queue. So it's really, you know, first come, first serve. You get your stuff in and we're going to be right behind you doing what we need to do. That's how we prioritize the letter writing process. You know, so just know that it's a time-consuming process. The faculty committee is an all-volunteer committee who are doing this over the summer while they're doing research, while they're, you know, doing other things that they need to do to prepare for the academic year ahead. They're advising the pre-med students and writing the committee letter and coordinating with each other to review other people's letters. We're super lucky. They're very generous. And so, you know, I just remind people of that. They like to work with Vassar students, right? They're doing it because they want to. And many of the advisors have been on the committee for years and years and years. We have retired members on the committee. That's how much they enjoy the process. And so, you know, we want what's best for you. We want to support you as strongly as possible. And we'll be behind you doing, you know, our part. But it's important for you to monitor your part of it as well. So in the very beginning, I showed you where you can monitor the status of your application, right? On that side bar where it says status and, you know, is it submitted? Is it active? Is it hold? Sometimes it'll say hold because it's waiting for your transcript to come. That's why I say get your transcript requests in now, right? You don't want your app held up because the transcript hasn't gotten there. Those are the easy things that you can get done without, you know, while you're studying. So now I'm going to turn it over to Lucy and Dominic, who've been through the process. I've only been on this side of the process, who would talk to you about their experience applying.
You can stay there. I'll probably get out to Tim. Okay. And feel free to get out and get more pizza.
That's a lot.
Plenty of it.
They gave us free stuff.
Oh,
Ooh, I like
Hey guys. All right. So I think that was a very comprehensive introduction. So I guess we'll be open to questions about any part of the process, so like secondaries, interviews, of course that sort of regular, the AMCAS or sort of like primary application. Does anybody have stuff? We can also just.
So the personal statement is about one experience. Can you repeat writing about that experience in the 15?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I actually did that, and I had the same sort of issue. What I did, and I know other people who did the same thing, if you wrote your essay about that one big thing, don't take one of the 3 most significant experience chunks and devote it to that same item. Say like in your little blurb, again, give those details, right? That's what the blurb is for, like when you did it and what it meant to you, but then also say this experience is is detailed in greater sort of in-depthness, like in my personal statement. Just acknowledge that it was important to you, but you won't be spending your important experience chunk on it. Okay.
So it's not common for people to talk about something that they listed in one of their 15 activities in personal statement. And the personal statement do not want to rehash the 15 activities. But if you're going to talk about something that you mentioned in 15 activities, then you're going to expand upon it in the personal statement. It's going to lean into the story that you're telling to the reader.
Yeah, and I touched upon a couple of my activities in my personal statement, but they're kind of going beyond kind of the basics of the activity section. Don't repeat information.
Yeah, I think you'll realize quite quickly that the space that they give you for the activities, like not the most meaningful ones, just the regular 15 spaces, they're quite short. And so you typically won't have a ton of time to elaborate. So I wouldn't worry too much about like a ton of overlap. You'd be hard pressed to have a lot of overlap. Those little blurbs are really bare bones. So
They're about 100 words.
Yeah.
So that sounds good. So.
Yeah. Which is like a few sentences.
And the other thing is you're going to have secondaries.
Mhm.
To talk about additional things in your secondary. So I don't know, like I always tell people when you're drafting your personal statement, just rewrite. Don't worry about the character limit, just write. All of it might not end up in the personal statement, but save every version because you might pull from those different versions when you're writing in your secondaries.
Yeah, I mean that definitely happened for me. I think, yeah. So, any other questions about the process?
So why don't you tell us a little bit about how you select these schools?
Yeah, for sure. Do you want to start?
Yeah, I'll start. So for me personally, I think location is the most important factor. So first, northeast kind of part of the country. Since I'm from New York State, so I want to stay in the northeast. So I kind of limited myself to the northeast. And the other thing was in the city versus suburban rural. I know I want to be in a city and really want a school that kind of focused on a lot of working with different populations and socioeconomically diverse areas. So I'm primarily focused on like schools in Boston or maybe New York, and a few other places. But we have to weigh what's important to you.
Oh wow! Oh my god!
Yeah, well, we actually don't need it on the screen.
I think you're nervous.
That's fine.
Yeah, so just kind of weigh what's the most important to you.
Yeah. So for me, I mean, some of the same stuff, but also very different. So the state or like the region wasn't as important to me. I mean, I knew I didn't want to go like all the way to California, but I was open to anything like through the Midwest. Although I was leaning northeast, but I think something also to keep in mind, unless you have a very strong like state leaning, where you know you want to go to one of your state schools, if there are multiple. Like, be open to different regions of the U.S. If you at all can, because like with all the different criteria that you might have. So for me, like I wanted there to be research opportunities. I mean, like a lot of research, specifically basic science, and also a lot of opportunities for sort of volunteer work. There aren't as many med schools as there are like undergrad institutions, and I think you realize quite quickly that like there aren't like that many that are going to fit every single exact part of your criteria. But they really do many of the same things, mostly the same exact things. So sort of, I was more open to location, city, rural, all that stuff. But I really just selected based on a few like broad ideas: research, service, interesting location. That was it.
I think the distinction between schools is use the MSRs and not the school.
Oh, yeah. For sure. So I did. So the MSAR, is like an online platform done by AMCAS or AMC that basically like has all of that info that you might need to find in like school, like like grad school.
Yeah,
like if you Google a different school, like it's probably a better resource that has all of the information, the most comprehensive information, and the most updated information on those schools. And you can, I think, buy it for like $20. But come up to me afterwards if you have it, because I still have access through July. So, well, because you get it for a calendar year. So if you can't pay, let me know. I'll give you my info. Oh my God, it's going on YouTube? Well, email me. That's fine too. But yeah, so that's a really good resource, MSAR.
I use that a lot as well.
And like honestly, also just the like the websites of the schools, all the info's there. You just kind of have to like pick it out a little bit more. But the websites do give you a good idea of like the vibe of the school, some of the things they're most committed to. Any specific questions about like figuring out which schools to apply to? Because it can be tough. Yeah. Right. So yeah, exactly. It does work very differently from undergrad. So part of the reason I wasn't super worried about like only applying to schools that exactly fit my criteria was because you visit every school. I mean, unless maybe there are exceptions if you're like abroad, like out of the country, but basically if you get an interview, you visit, and they do like tours, they do info sessions, they do all that stuff at the interview. So you come out of the interview with a very good idea of what the school is all about, what the area is like. You can stay with the student host. So you do see all the schools that you may end up attending. I think a lot of detail. Anybody else? Do you guys want to know a little bit maybe about like secondaries, like what kind of stuff they ask, filling those out? Yeah, you want to start?
So I think in terms of, once you submit your primary, there's going to be the processing period, which will depend on when you send it in. Could be 6 weeks, could be 2, whatever. From my experience, some schools sent me secondaries as soon as I submitted the primary before it was processed. Fewer schools do that. And then once it was fully processed, I think within like a 2 or 3 day span, like the rest of them, so I got like 12 at once. So they say that for, I guess, best practice, you should get them in within 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I tried to stick to that.
I think that's one of those things. There is sort of like wiggle room, and this is one junction of the application that like, say you submitted your AMCAS, your primary application the first day, and it processed in 2 weeks and you're ahead of the game, you might have a little bit more time to finish those secondaries and still be like nice and early in the app cycle. Whereas if you submitted late in the AMCAS, like I submitted a little bit later than I wanted to, if you kind of can like pre-write a little bit, which we'll talk about in a second, and get them out like in a week, that's gonna sort of like catch you back up a little bit.
Right.
But yeah, I think best practice
Best
would be
practice
saying
is
like
2 weeks. And which can be a lot. So secondaries kind of vary in length and the kinds of questions they ask. Some ask like 3 or 4 biographical questions, and like that's it. Some have pages and pages of short essays.
Yep, one made me write a 4-page autobiography. That's the exception to the rule, though.
Yeah,
Don't worry, that's not typical. That is Vanderbilt. They also pre-screen though.
Yeah.
So like they only send secondaries to like maybe like a quarter of the people that apply, so they don't have everybody writing their autobiography. It's a lot of autobiographies.
But more typically, probably like 2 or 3 short essays.
Like 250 words
Yeah.
to 400 words tops.
Yeah, somewhere in there. Some of them are optional, some are required. So, and I think you find as you go along, you see the same themes multiple times. So a common one is, are there any specific challenges that you've faced, through identity or some other obstacle in your life? A lot of times those might be optional. Time working with others has been challenging.
Yes, they like to ask about teamwork. Another big one.
Where you see yourself 10 to 15 years.
And then also like they want a lot of them ask about passions. Like they want you to talk about something that interests you, and like why. Usually it's not specific. They don't want you to talk about medicine. They want you to talk about something else. But okay, importantly, a lot of these questions, these secondary questions, will be reused from years prior by the same school. Not always. So like if you find out what last year's prompt was, there's no guarantee that's going to be this year's prompt.
Right.
So you don't get to be like upset and disappointed if it changes. But so some forums, students like post these things. Student Doctor, people will post. First of all, they post secondaries from the previous year. But then if you're like a little bit later in the application cycle, say you submit like 2 weeks after the first date, like a lot of the time, whoever, like people who get the secondary applications first will post that like your year's secondaries. So you can pre-write your secondaries potentially with varying degrees of certainty as to whether it's actually going to be the question. So that can be a way to sort of like spread out like trauma, like 12 sets of responses.
Right. And as we said, like a lot of them are going to be the same or almost the same from school to school. I think the only thing I found challenging there is a lot of times it'll be like the length is different. So you have this essay in a 500-word version and a 300-word version and a 150-word version. So it's easier than starting fresh, I think.
And the thing is, like, if you have, I mean, I don't know who would, but like if you have a lot of time on your hands at any point up until this process, you can start thinking about, again, some of these big themes that will almost certainly come up in your secondaries in some way, and just start to think about the experiences and like stories that you have that may be of relevance to these types of essays. Even just doing that can help you move through your secondaries quicker and have a clearer sort of destination point.
And another big one is a lot of schools will do like a school specific why X school. And yeah, for those, really just spend a lot of time on their websites and like actually go in depth into what they offer, go to different sites, kind of find what other people are saying, just kind of get a feel for what makes it unique, what stands out, and what makes you want to go there.
There's a certain amount of like reading between the lines that happens there. I mean, again, like schools' websites will typically be laid out like, you know, curriculum, like research, service, that type of stuff. But you can usually get a feel for like, there's certain schools that absolutely have a really strong commitment to like diversity of their student population or diversity and need level of the people they're serving. Or again, like basic research. There's some schools that are really big on that. So you can kind of figure it out. It may not say it explicitly, but like be on the lookout for that type of thing.
Yeah.
And that will also help you decide where to apply.
Right.
not just do the secondary. Any other questions on secondaries and like that process?
Another thing to keep in mind is in terms of cost. So you do, it's about $37 per school for the primary, but secondary is going to run anywhere from $60 to $120 additional.
Yeah, they're really expensive.
So that's something to keep in mind when applying to schools and choosing how many to apply to.
But again, keep in mind, okay, so for the, what is it called? Like the FAP, the financial, the assistance program, they will, I think, cover whatever is that year's average number of medical school applications all the way through the secondary process, right? So they cover it for AMCAS, they also cover it for each school secondary. But that does mean that if you want your secondaries to be totally covered, you can only apply like, typically it's like 14 schools.
Yeah.
You can apply to more, it's just that cost is going to come to you instead of going through the assistance program. But yeah, so don't freak out about that if you're in that situation. Yeah.
The big personal statement. From start to finish.
It's a really hard question
a
to
hard
answer,
question.
and I know you probably want like a discrete like answer. I mean, my best guess. So I started thinking about the way I was going to write my essay like all the way back in March. I didn't have anything written, right? But I knew what I wanted to convey, and sort of the way I wanted to approach the personal statement, like with sort of like a story instead of, or like one experience instead of combining multiple. That kind of broad stuff. I was thinking about that March, April. I think I started writing in May. I had a working draft. I don't know, like, I think honestly a working draft, it's a short essay, like even like a few days of just like tinkering, you can usually get one, but it's because it takes a while because a lot of thought goes into it beforehand.
Right.
And it's really hard to figure out how you're going to distill like all of this into like a 5,300 character thing.
Yeah, and I think I had a very clear idea in my head going into it of what I wanted it to be, but it takes a lot longer than expected to actually get it down on paper and get it within. It comes into like around 900 words, a little less. Like my first draft was probably like close to 2,000. So it's a lot of. There's a lot of, depending on how long your original draft is, how long it's going to take you to work it down to what you need it to be and make it flow well and everything and convey what you want. So it varies. It depends on how long you're working on it every day.
Yeah. My like best advice would be just don't let like the fear of starting it or like the anxiety related to starting it prevent you from like even dealing with it. Like just start writing, and after enough of that, you'll get there.
Just get your ideas down too, but don't worry about the word limit at first. Just get everything out and you can work it out later.
Yeah. So any other specific questions you want to talk about? Interviews, it's kind of early for interviews. We can talk about how that process moves. We're not going to go crazy. Do you guys want to hear the interviews a little bit? We'll keep it short because I know you guys are like just doing your application. Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. So there's sort of, as we've talked about, there's a lot of stuff, a lot of sort of applications, processes, different things that you're going to have to be doing all the way up through your secondaries, right? And as soon as you submit your secondary, it goes from being like this thing where as quickly as you move is how quickly your application proceeds to like just a waiting game.
Yeah.
And in terms of the time between like you submitting your secondaries, assuming that your file's complete, which it should be, to you potentially being extended in an interview, it just varies so much.
Yeah.
What was your sort of average time?
Average? I don't know, like My earliest was probably less than a month.
Yeah, I was gonna say like the shortest turnaround I think was that I saw and heard of was about 2 weeks, which is quite quick. Don't
Right.
freak out if you don't have anything in 2 weeks. It's not mean anything.
Right.
But I mean, it could be,
I
it could
think
literally be months.
I think my last one was probably
I feel like 3 months or something.
4 months.
4 months,
four and a
something like
half,
that. And again, it really doesn't mean anything.
Right.
So you can't sort of get into that headspace. But once you have that, they'll usually give you a few options of dates. You can schedule one. Usually earlier is better, and that's just typical. Although there are some schools that don't do like truly rolling admissions. There's some schools that do like 3 rounds of acceptance. So
Right.
figure that out before you schedule your interview date, because you might have a little bit more flexibility, like not have to miss work or class. So like be mindful of that. But yeah, so the timeline, like I think the strictness of the timeline really disappears once you send out your secondaries. It's on their timeline, and nobody really knows what that looks like. So don't be too worried about it. It will happen.
Yes.
Do you guys have any? Do you want to know any more about interviews, or do you want to sort of just leave it at that?
They do.
That's what they want. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So we actually wrote up like a guide to
Yes, we
interviewing, which has I think everything and more than we're gonna be
Yes,
able to talk
that
about right
you'll
now.
need.
So definitely refer to that. It covers everything through like send the interview all the way through like doing it, writing thank you notes towards the end. But you want to give like a brief outline of how the interview is?
So I guess we'll start with getting there. So generally attire is formal, so suit.
Yeah.
Suit. I mean,
Which feels weird.
it feels
like, I
weird,
know,
so
but don't be that
sometime before your interview, before you get or expect to get interviews, get a suit.
Oh my god. Yeah.
So you're not rushing the week before.
I was rushing the week before. I was running around Poughkeepsie trying to find a tailor. It was very stressful. I don't recommend. Yeah. So as soon as you submit your secondaries, like think about if you don't have a suit, like think about going and finding one.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be anything like crazy fancy
No.
or like custom. No. You know.
And that's the other thing that going early helps. So like you're not in a time crunch and just getting the nearest suit, even if it's too expensive. You can find relatively affordable options if you give yourself time to look. So
make sure that you build in time for travel. I mean, if you're like taking the train down, you know, it might sound silly, but like make sure that you know like that you have somebody to drive you there and back. If you're flying, make sure that you know what you're doing, like on public transport and stuff. And really like err on the side of more time, because the last thing you want is to be freaking out about making it to like building the C on the 37th floor of this building in a city that you've never been to. So definitely do that. And make sure that you have accommodations set well ahead of time, because again, you don't want to be paying like premium prices. Almost every school has a student host program, which again, like if you get on that, they'll send it with you, your info about your interview. If you get on that early, you will almost certainly be able to stay with somebody. And it's good because it's usually like very close to the school. It's exceptionally free. And they're really nice, so definitely take advantage of that.
On the middle site, there's information about the discount for.
Oh, for hotels. Yeah.
Yeah.
The MCATs and for interviews.
Yeah.
The information on there is also.
There is, yeah. There's info there as well about like interviewing more different perspectives.
Yeah.
How much time did you, how was it balanced being a senior?
So it's very piece specific, but like for me it was okay because again, like I finished my pre-med courses by the end of 2 year, which is how I ended up applying this year. I think those things typically go together. Like usually, you're done with those classes before applying. But usually, I found the interviews are usually offered for whatever reason on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And like I didn't have Friday class, and I had like one Monday class. So usually, depending on your schedule, you'll actually be able to do your interviews without missing a ton of school. And professors tend to be like incredibly understanding. Like they know that you have a life that comes after Vassar. And you know, if you explain to them and give them a lot of like warning, like a heads up, as soon as you know, then they'll be fine about it. It's doable. It does require a little bit of planning.
Definitely, I think.
Want to talk about like interview day, like what happens?
So you'll get there. So typically the school will provide you with the information you need in terms of where you need to go and times and all of that. And those really vary school to school. I've had interviews at 8 a.m. I've had them at like noon.
Yeah.
So it really depends, and that'll play into your travel plans as well. But typically, so some people wonder if you need to bring like a pad folio or something with you. We had a very stressful moment
We really did.
for our first interviews.
It's so funny, like all these like little random things come up, but they end up being very like feeling very important, but they're not. Pad folio, for example, I'd never heard of that in my life. I don't know if that's like a thing other people know about. But like, do you bring a folder or not? Like, truth is like it like really doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like, what is it? Oh my gosh.
Okay.
Okay.
So.
Let us tell you what a pad folio is. I was on Amazon looking at like hundreds of pad folios.
I was running through Staples trying to find the right one.
Yeah.
It's like a little folder that's like covered in.
It's usually leather.
It's like leather bound usually. Maybe zip up.
Has a space for a notepad.
Yeah. Or it's built in.
Yeah.
And there's like spaces for folders.
I actually got made fun of by one of my interviewers about my pad folio. So that's how I knew I had gone over the top. But it was okay, don't worry, nothing bad happened. He was just like, like, did you bring a computer in here? Like what is that? I was like, it's a pad folio. Because, okay, on Student Doctor, which is a forum that is incredibly helpful and also like incredibly problematic because it'll just stress you out so much. There was like a whole like page-long thread about, or like tens of pages long thread about like what to bring.
Yeah.
So like try to be minimal about your interaction with those forums because like people on those forums are not reflective of everybody. Pad folios not necessary.
They're not necessary.
Probably. But do whatever, like really, do whatever feels comfortable. If you want to bring a bag, like bag.
I ended up just bringing with me, like, in whatever travel bag I had, like a folder and like a little notebook just in case. But the thing is, pretty much everywhere you go, as soon as you get there, they're going to give you a folder, a hefty packet full of materials, like for your day and about the school and all of that.
Yeah.
Maybe you'll even get like a little drawstring bag, or some maybe a pen, some swag.
Yeah.
So you don't need a pad folio.
And like it's not just about the pad folio. That's a metaphor.
That's a metaphor for everything.
Everything that goes into these interviews, like the details of like what you wear and what you bring, really don't matter all that much. And the interviews are very similar when it comes down to it. And the way the day goes is very similar.
Right.
You usually go in. They may or may not feed you. Be mindful of that. Like don't go in on an empty stomach.
Right.
Usually they give you like an info session about the school, and then you either go on an interview or you go on tours.
Right.
But all three of those things are sort of mixed up in a different order. The interviews, again, this is all in the packet, but there are typically two types of interviews. There are like long form traditional interviews, and then there are multiple mini interviews. So the long form traditional interviews are still like the dominant form, typically like 30 minutes to an hour, which sounds like a ton, I know, but it's not, I promise. That's typical, I think.
And that's what you think of as like a normal interview. Like And from, I don't know, from my experience, the questions aren't too
Yeah, there are a few key ones
outlandish.
which are sort of outlined in the packet that come up almost everywhere. They usually want you in one way or another to get to like why medicine and give a more, in-depth case-specific answer than like your personal statement might have. Like tell them in person. They also usually want to know why that school, again, may or may not have been covered in secondaries, but they want to hear it from you.
And they want to hear, I think, about kind of your academic development, like maybe your study habits, and why did you choose to study this, or why this activity, or all of that.
Yeah.
Kind of getting a better idea of kind of your story, what drives you, and all of that.
But one of the nice things about the interviews is that honestly writing your secondaries really and your primary, like doing your whole application really prepares you for the interview in that you are forced to like
think about yourself.
analyze, your own self and your own sort of like journey to medical school just in so many different ways. It just like you log so much time doing that that by the time you get there, the questions you encounter in an interview, like I feel like you've encountered almost everyone in one of your secondaries in some way.
Right.
So just maybe practice. You can do mock interviews in the office, but if you're not here, you can even do it with like a friend. Oh, you can do Skype. Yeah.
Not the MMI. The MMI,
Yeah. But it's really about practicing sort of conveying in an understandable way and in a personable way, like all of that stuff that you wrote about. To get comfy doing that.
And really, seriously, writing, like I don't think I've ever written or spoken as much about myself as I have in the past year.
It's a lot.
So you really do get an idea of things you want to say. And it all comes pretty easily after you've done all of that. So,
And like they can be fun, especially if you've done one already. I don't know, it can be kind of cool. It's like touring undergrad. Also, a lot of the time they ask you about like why Vassar. I'm not sure if that's like, I got that all the time. Think about that. It's kind of a fun thing to talk about. I think that pretty much covers it for interviews.
I attended 4 or 5 of my interviews. So you don't have to go on an interview if you are offered one and you don't want to. So if you've already gotten into schools and say, I know I would go to the school I got into over the school I'm going to interview at, saves time and money.
Yeah, I did that.
So,
I think I was like 7. But also, like, again, I like turned down one once I knew. Because like really once you know where you want to go, there's not a huge need to sort of continue doing these, especially if it costs a lot of money to do that interview. So like if it's taking a train down to the city, but like for me it was like flying national and I was like, probably not. That's kind of
not uncommon for people to get interviews. That's a lot. It's not uncommon for people to interview at one school and get into that one school, or have 2 interviews and get into one school. I only say that because, the candidate, like, why I don't have more interview invitations, interviews are competitive, and you just need one. Acceptance, right? But sometimes people will interview at 2 or 3.
Yeah, and like really remember, you are only going to attend one medical school, and like really, like it really becomes apparent over time. Like, yes, there are differences between medical schools, but like they really do the same thing when push comes to shove, and you can have a really awesome experience at pretty much any one of them.
you can.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're applying to a school, I mean, hopefully that means you can see yourself.
Right. In terms of like the logistics.
Doing well there logistically, being happy there. So
yeah, it's definitely not about how many interviews you get. or how many, again, even how many schools. I mean, you want to apply to enough schools that you have a range because you don't know that you're gonna like click with every school. You don't know, how many interviews you're gonna get, but you don't need just endless options.
Right.
You just need enough.
So if, I don't know, September, October rolls around and you don't have an interview invitation,
It's okay.
people around you do, it's okay.
Totally okay.
It's okay. So, because they come through all the way into March, even April.
Yep.
So,
I was not really May 20th. I don't know. But yes.
but
Yeah, they really do come in all the way.
it's a
And like,
long
I
process.
think what they start, I mean, I didn't have any, but I think they technically sometimes start as early as August. Yeah. So like, that's crazy. Like August through April, which is like typical. I mean, that's just nuts. So again, seriously, don't lose your mind. It's gonna be good.
Yes, it's a rigorous process.
So
It's a lot of waiting.
yeah, there's a lot of waiting.
There is.
But some of that waiting, especially on the earlier end of things, you can use if you want to try to like get ahead of on stuff like secondaries.
Right.
Some of that waiting you can do stuff, but a lot of it you really can't.
Right.
That's okay too.
Yeah.
Is there anything else?
So for, I guess, end of interview day,
Write your thank you notes.
Write your thank
I know
you
this seems
notes.
obvious, but like do it. Just do it.
and make sure, like sometimes a lot of schools will have kind of an online portal
Oh, like
system.
updating, yes.
Like some of them will want you to update, send your thank you note through the portal or whatever. Make sure it actually uploads.
Yes.
One of mine didn't.
Oh
So
gosh.
a few days later it went up. I checked. So, but make sure it thinks you actually upload.
Related to that, this is a very long process, as you sort of gotten the sense of. So a lot will change potentially in a year. Like you will have done new stuff, and you might have like assumed new positions and whatever. So you can write letters of update. Some schools have a form, again, like a portal by which that can be done in like an official way. Others, they really just want you to email admissions,
Right.
but that information is typically available to you either through previous emails you've received. Like they will tell you how they want you to be sending them the information. So just be mindful of that. And if you have issues with sort of like doing updates, knowing how to do that, that's very far forward, so we won't worry about saying, but you can ask us. We'll just make this business. We just flew through like 8
Yeah, we
months, so.
Um,
I mean, I think that pretty much covers the bases. Is there anything you wanted us to cover beyond? Yeah?
Questions?
Like anything.
about anything.
Like I perseverated about skirt suit versus pantsuit. Like even questions like that are okay. No? Okay. Well, that's fine. If you guys have any questions that you want to ask individually, you can come up now. But thank you guys so much for coming, and we hope it was really helpful. Great. And please take some food.
Yeah.
It seems like there's food.
It seems like there's a lot left.
Thank you.